Donald Trump's vision is one of anger, hate, revenge, and retribution. And he calls for another bloodbath when he loses again.
Biden is the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country between the borders and everything else.
The fact that the Democrats right now are trying to shore up the Democratic base for Joe Biden shows you that he's playing defense. President Trump is playing offense.
Let's not forget, Joe Biden won the presidency last time, and he won Pennsylvania, and he won union households.
Well, with the back and forth today, we have new Fox polls in key swing states, as we showed you earlier in the show. Former President Trump up in Georgia, up in Michigan, tied in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Still margin of error in Michigan, but up in Georgia. If you look at adding RFK Jr. as an independent candidate to the mix, they do change a little bit. The numbers do. Pennsylvania changes up 2 for Trump, and then Wisconsin goes the other way for President Biden. Then you look at the issues. Voters trust President Biden more on abortion, but former President Trump more on foreign policy, economy, and immigration. And you can see those numbers there. With that, we'll start there with our panel. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, host of The Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. And Kimberly Strassel, a member of the editorial board at The Wall Street Journal. Guy, you look at these numbers, essentially it's a tight race in the key states. It hasn't been much movement, a little movement, but not much.
Yeah, when you compare our new Fox numbers, Brett, to the Real Clear Politics average, it's basically no daylight. These are more of the same, sort of a continuity in the numbers. The one thing that's interesting to me is when you break it out, not just the head-to-head, but you include RFK Jr., he announced with his campaign that they apparently got access to the ballot in Michigan, which is significant. Of course, the Kennedy family coming out in force to endorse Biden today. That's an interesting subplot here. The conventional wisdom is that RFK's presence on the ticket, or on the ballot rather, would benefit Donald Trump and hurt Joe Biden. That is true in 2 of the states in our poll, but in the other 2, it actually helps Biden's margin a little bit. So it's all within a point or 2, but that's an interesting note to keep an eye on. It's not quite as clean cut, at least right now, as a lot of people would suggest.
Yeah, that's right. And Leslie, RFK Jr.'s sister, Carrie, was on with that endorsement today. Let's take a listen.
Nobody competes with President Biden when it comes to carrying on the legacies of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Ted Kennedy. We love Bobby and we like him, but that's not what this race is about. This race is Donald Trump is an existential threat to our country and to our world.
RFK Jr. with the statement on the members of his family endorsing Biden today, saying, I hear some of my family will be endorsing President Biden today. I'm pleased they are politically active. It's a family tradition. We are divided in our opinions, but united in our love for each other. I hold this as a possibility for America, too. Can we disagree without hating our opponents? Can we restore civility and respect to public discourse? I think we can. He definitely factors in, now in 9 states on the ballot, including Michigan, which is key. Leslie.
You know, we have seen this historically, Brett, not with the Kennedy clan, but we certainly saw it with Ralph Nader, right? At the beginning, you know, people are eye-rolling, don't take him seriously. And when you break the numbers down in exit polling, you know, obviously if he wasn't there, a lot of people say that Al Gore would have been our president instead of George Bush. You know, whenever you have a third-party candidate that gains traction, it's still early in the game, believe it or not, still a lifetime away as much as it is just around the corner. You know, to Guy's point, it benefits Donald Trump in some states, it benefits Joe Biden in other states. With respect to the 15 family members who endorsed President Biden, I know people get mad when I say this, but I don't put any weight in endorsements. I really just don't see that putting somebody over the finish line, whether Democrat or Republican, no matter how big a name or last name those endorsements come from.
Meantime, Kimberly, jurors, 12 jurors have been selected and sworn in, seated. Reuters says opening statements could take place Monday in this case, the Trump hush money case in New York. Justice Juan Merchan, the judge overseeing the trial. Earlier in the day, Merchan dismissed a juror who said she felt intimidated that some personal information was made public. The judge was also accused another juror after prosecutors said he may not have disclosed prior brushes with the law. Here is the former president on this process.
I'm so
supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm supposed to be in a lot of different places campaigning. But I've been here all day on a trial that really is a very unfair trial. We got a crooked president. He should be on trial with all the stuff he's done and his family.
And prosecutors, Kimberly, say that the former president has violated the gag order 7 more times. What do you make of this? How it affects him politically?
Yeah, I think you can tie it back to those Fox News polls you just put up, Brett. A couple of those were also done back in January and February. And the thing that struck me is that nothing's really changed in the numbers very much. And that's striking not just because Joe Biden's now out actively campaigning and it doesn't seem to be making a difference, but because, remember, the whole goal of the left with all of these prosecutions against Donald Trump was to tar him and tarnish him in the eyes of voters and try to pull away votes from him. This trial's now ongoing, and what we're seeing from the media fascination with it this week is it's keeping him very much in the news. I know he was complaining there that he couldn't go out and campaign, but he's getting plenty of headlines, and it certainly does not seem to be hurting him among the people that he needs to come out and vote for him. That could change depending on whether or not there's a conviction, but right now this is not working for Democrats the way that they had hoped it would.
Yeah, Guy, you know, it's interesting that there is a lot of talk about threat to democracy. We've talked many times about former administration officials from the Trump administration that have a problem with the former president. Either have said they're not going to vote for him. His vice president said that. Others have talked about that. But it seems now that some of them are coming home. Here's Bill Barr today.
Given 2 bad choices, I think it's my duty to pick the person I think would do the least harm to the country. And in my mind, that's I will vote the Republican ticket. The real danger to democracy, as I say, is the progressive agenda. And while Trump, and I said Trump may be playing Russian roulette, but continuation of the Biden administration is national suicide.
And we'll see if there are more, Guy, but that's an interesting statement from Bill Barr.
Yeah, and our colleague here, Mark Thiessen, who is a speechwriter, of course, for President George W. Bush, he made a similar case on my radio show yesterday, saying if you look at a threat to institutions and democracy, the greater threat is on the left. And he makes the case that if you look at the way they go after the Supreme Court and the filibuster and other things that they have in their sights, that would do a lot more damage. And a big difference being when Trump offers different affronts to the system, he is resisted aggressively, often by the media and other institutions. When the left is attacking the system, often they have cheerleaders in the press corps. That's one difference that I think a lot of right-leaning people internalize.
Last word here. I only have 30 seconds, Leslie, but sometimes do you think that by going overboard in the anti-Trump push that it brings people home on the other side?
Yeah, definitely. It sparks a flame to those supporters and those who feel that he's being victimized and attacked by Democrats. But I would just say to my buddy Mark and to Bill Barr, sorry, the polls don't agree with you. Majority of people trust Joe Biden when it comes to preserving democracy over Donald Trump.
Okay, panel. Thanks a lot.
I'm concerned Israel may not pass through the Senate right now if it's not included in the package. We really want that to be in the final product, and if we separate them, then none of our priorities will be reflected.
A number of progressives will vote against, I think, the Israel funding. I mean, if there are no conditions to protect more innocent people.
So let's talk about the challenges facing Congress when it comes to this foreign aid package, also the anti-Semitic protests and other protests across the country. Joining us, Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine. Senator, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Brett. Glad to be with you.
How do you see everything right now with the House moving forward, and paint the picture for us from your view?
Brett, as you know, the Senate acted about 2 months ago on this aid package that was basically 3 elements. It was defense aid to Israel, well, maybe 4 elements: defense aid to Israel, defense aid to Ukraine, humanitarian aid to Ukraine and Gaza, and then some Indo-Pacific defense aid. We put those 4 elements into one bill, sent it to the House. It looks like what the House is going to do, and I'm really excited that they are now taking this up, because we've been really urging them to, is they're going to take them up as 4 different bills. There's going to be an Israel defense bill, a Ukraine bill that will have Ukraine both defense and humanitarian aid, and an Indo-Pacific bill. And then the House is going to do a 4th bill that will have things like TikTok, sanctions against Iran, some matters that were not in the original Senate bill. They're going to vote on those beginning on Saturday. I think you will see the House possibly embrace all 4 of these bills, and by rule, they will then combine them into one. We'll come back next week in the Senate and work to get it to President Biden's desk. And I'm feeling optimistic.
President Biden's optimistic as well. I mean, he's got this statement out saying he strongly supports this package. The House must pass the package this week. The Senate should quickly follow. I'll sign it into law immediately to send a message to the world. We will stand with our friends, and we don't let Iran or Russia succeed. Senator Sanders had a different thought. Take a listen.
The Democratic base wants to stop funding for Netanyahu's war machine. So if your question is it going to hurt the president unless he turns this around? Yeah, it will.
You think it hurts the president politically?
You know, Brett, I'm not sure about when Senator Sanders made that statement, but I suspect he made it before the Iranian attack on Israel, where they fired, drones and missiles in the hundreds at Israel. And
yeah, it was April 2nd.
The delicate challenge right now is a delicate one. We want to provide Israel with the capacity to defend itself against those who would annihilate it, and that's Hamas, and that is Hezbollah, and that's Iran, and that's militias in Iraq and Syria. At the same time, we also want to do what we can to minimize civilian suffering, and that's why this bill, when we sent it out of the Senate, it had significant humanitarian aid for Gaza as well. You also see that Israel has reopened the Erez border crossing. Much more humanitarian aid has been coming into Gaza. We've been pushing on that for months. The pace hasn't made us happy, but at least now it's picking up, in the World Food Program under the leadership of Cindy McCain noticed this yesterday. So we're trying to find this balance, but I suspect what you will see is what you saw when the Senate acted on this bill in February. Very strong support from the Democratic side. We were 48-3 for this bill in February. The Republicans were 22-27. I would suspect we might even get more Republican votes when this bill comes back to the Senate.
What do you make of all these protests around the country when you see these images? They seem to be coordinated. I can't pin that down to where they're coordinated by or who. There were even protests outside your hotel. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about it, and how do you read it?
Brett, the way it's a heartbreaking situation, and people have really strong emotions about it. Now, what I don't like is when people take out their emotions, against one another for something that's happening thousands of miles away. But it is a very emotional thing, particularly for anybody who has family in the region. So I spent a lot of time talking to hostage families, and because obviously we have hostages who are Americans, and one has a connection to Richmond. They're heartbroken. And then I know people who are Palestinian and have family on the West Bank or family in Gaza that are not Hamas members and that are suffering. And so I think when you have a situation that has this level of emotion to it, then there's going to be challenges and protests. I don't know about them being organized, but I just think it's a heartbreaking situation, and that's why we're doing what we can to find a path toward de-escalation. But we do have to do the twin jobs of both defending Israel from those who would annihilate it, but also doing what we can to minimize civilian suffering.
Well, Senator Kaine, we appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Always welcome back on Special Report.
Good to be with you.
It is shaping up, meantime, to be a period of increased dissension and disarray on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers are on deadline for a number of different tasks, including a new federal surveillance bill and aid packages for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. And there is a question of who will be leading the House through all of this, as the Speaker is holding on to his leadership by a thread. Senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram has details tonight.
Aid to Ukraine and Mike Johnson's speakership.
He's serving Ukraine first and America last.
Both dangling by a thread. Marjorie Taylor Greene threatening to oust Johnson if he helps Ukraine and fails to address the border. Matt Gaetz engineered the ouster of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy last fall.
My hope was that the motion to vacate would be an elixir that only required one dose for effectiveness. But sometimes there are some therapies that require more than one dose.
The tension so high that one Republican congresswoman implored leaders to send everyone home to cool off.
No good decisions are going to be made right now when people have such hot tempers.
The House expected to take individual votes this weekend on bills to aid Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. then blend them into one package for the Senate.
The reason for that, frankly, is that I'm concerned Israel may not pass through the Senate right now if it's not included in the package.
Democrats are torn about supporting Israel.
I believe that we need to have conditions enforced on U.S. military assistance. Those conditions are not presently in this bill.
Democrats are also divided on bailing out Johnson if conservatives try to topple the speaker.
The Republicans should help Johnson. He's given them everything they want.
And we have to make sure that we don't see somebody who's trying to do the right thing get punished for that.
The other issue before Congress, updating the foreign spying program known as FISA. The Senate just started debate. FISA goes dark tomorrow at midnight unless the Senate votes. Brett?
We'll talk to Democratic Senator Tim Kaine in just a bit. Chad Perkins live on the Hill. Chad, thanks. Meantime, the House staged a vote today condemning Iran following its attacks on Israel last weekend. At the White House, the Biden administration is announcing new sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran. Correspondent Griff Jenkins is there tonight, live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Griff.
Good evening, Brett. The administration says it's taking sweeping actions against Iran's drone program, one of the country's largest steel producers and automobile companies with ties to the IRGC. In a White House statement, President Biden says this: "Let it be clear to all those who enable or support Iran's attacks. The United States is committed to Israel's security. We are committed to the security of our personnel and partners in the region, and we will not hesitate to take all necessary action to hold you accountable." But it's unclear, Brett, how sweeping these new sanctions will be. Iran's oil industry, which is exporting more oil than at any time in the past 6 years and boosting its economy by $35 billion per year, was not targeted. Republicans continue to criticize Biden over sanction waivers, some of which began under the previous administration.
His financial appeasement of Iran has added fuel to the fire. His administration reissued a sanctions waiver and renewed it again last month that gave Iran access to more than $10 billion.
Earlier today, U.S. and Israeli security counterparts met virtually to discuss Iran's planned Rafah offensive in Gaza. We're told the two sides agreed on the shared objective of defeating Hamas in Rafah, and that the U.S. team, led by Jake Sullivan, expressed concerns over various courses of actions. And as you mentioned, at the other end of Pennsylvania, the House voting to formally condemn Iran for its attack on Israel. 14 members voted against it, one a Republican, Thomas Massie. Brett?
Griff Jenkins live on the North Lawn. Griff, thanks. The effort to find a jury in the criminal trial for former President Donald Trump back on track tonight. As I mentioned, the jury has been sworn in and seated. The process actually was going in reverse at one point. Correspondent Nate Foy is outside the courthouse tonight with the latest. Good evening, Nate.
Hey, Brett, a roller coaster of a day ended with Judge Juan Merchan saying we have our jury. 12 jurors seated, you mentioned, as well as one alternate, so 5 more alternates are needed. And this all happened after 2 jurors were sent home in the morning session today. The DA's office found one of those jurors, a man, had been arrested for tearing down conservative political signs back in the 1990s. Another juror felt she could not serve impartially after her friends and family suspected that she might be a juror. Trump was again very critical of the trial while leaving the courthouse tonight.
The whole world is watching this hoax. You got a DA that's out of control. You have a judge that's highly conflicted.
The Manhattan DA's office accuses Trump of violating the court's gag order 7 additional times. The DA is asking the court to hold Trump in contempt for several social media posts, including one of them where Trump shared a story calling his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, a serial perjurer. Judge Juan Merchan will decide on any potential punishment for a gag order violation on Tuesday of next week. Now, Trump said tonight the whole trial is a sham directed by President Joe Biden. He accused the Department of Justice of coordinating with the Manhattan DA's office. But before his lawyers can make his case in court, again, we still need 5 more alternate jurors. The court will start with a pool of 22 prospective jurors for questioning tomorrow morning. If they can't agree on 5 more from that pool, several others have been sworn in and are ready to be questioned. So if they can wrap up jury selection tomorrow, Brett, opening statements could happen on Monday, but at the end of court today, Judge Merchan just let everybody know that court will end early on Monday and Tuesday of next week. It will end at 2 p.m. because of the Passover holiday. Brett?
Nate Foy outside the courthouse in New York. Nate, thanks. There's some encouraging news tonight for children suffering from certain types of cancer. Scientists are evaluating more than 100 medications for treating difficult and recurring cases. Correspondent Jonathan Sari shows us from Atlanta tonight.
When you find out your child has cancer, nothing else matters.
Diana Jenner's 3-year-old son Logan underwent 3 rounds of chemotherapy and a bone marrow transplant, only to see his acute myeloid leukemia relapse at the age of 5.
When cancers return, doctors usually have a challenge in selecting treatments. It's like entering this gigantic maze.
Researchers at Florida International University believe they found a way to eliminate some of the trial and error in cancer treatment. Combining DNA analysis with extensive drug testing, the scientists say they're able to see within days how small samples of a patient's living cancer cells respond to numerous potential treatments.
We tested over 120 FDA-approved drugs directly on the patient's cancer cells, and we did that within a week.
The lab collaborated with Logan's doctor to identify treatments that worked and eliminate those that did not.
One of his medications is very toxic to the heart. And what our testing showed us was that the regimen without that medication worked just as well with the tumor cells as it did with it.
In a peer-reviewed pediatric study published in Nature Medicine, only 1 of 8 participants with advanced relapsed cancers saw improved health with standard treatment. But of the 6 children receiving treatments guided by the FIU lab, 5 improved, including Logan, now 8 years old and cancer-free for more than 2 years.
I don't think my son would be here without this study.
Although the small FIU study focused on children, researchers say their method also works in adults. They're conducting ongoing human trials with Cleveland Clinic. Brett?
Jonathan Sari in Atlanta. Jonathan, thanks. And CB Cotton is on the Columbia campus tonight with the latest on what happened today there. Froze up a little bit before. Good evening, CB.
Good evening, Brett. Well, the arrests we saw earlier today certainly haven't deterred other protests from continuing at this hour, and the NYPD is working overtime to keep things contained. At least 100 people were arrested on the campus of Columbia University earlier this afternoon. University President Munish Shafiq says she authorized officers to move in after students were warned multiple times that they'd eventually be rounded up and detained. Fox News has confirmed Representative Ilhan Omar's daughter was among those who were detained. And according to some reports, the Congresswoman's daughter has been suspended along with others who participated in the encampment. Those who are now suspended risk being unable to complete courses on time. Students were detained with zip ties and then boarded onto correctional buses. Officers were forced to carry some off the lawn. Student organizers called on pro-Palestinian supporters to join them off campus outside the campus's main gate, where we saw the NYPD detain several people this morning. We've tried to speak to some of the protesters, but all have refused. Jewish students tell us they're scared and intimidated on a regular basis.
I have had more than enough, and if I wasn't graduating in a month, I would undoubtedly transfer. The thought of having to be here for another month is already close to unbearable, and I've not wanted to go to things like even my own graduation, just out of intimidation for the fact that I know that something like this that happens at almost every ceremony will happen there.
As you can see and hear behind me, Brett, the protests are far from over, and the NYPD continues to move more of its officers into this area. Back to you.
CB Cotton in New York. CB, thanks. Welcome to the Special Report homepage. I'm Brett Baer. We had a good discussion with the panel tonight about the new Fox polls of key battleground states, plus the latest news involving Israel and Iran and what's happening with protests here at home. You can see the segment right here on the website, along with reports from Brian Yanis and Griff Jenkins. Friday, the TikTok bill is moving forward, despite heavy lobbying against it. We'll see you at 6 p.m. Eastern on Fox News Channel for Special Report.
In the soft embrace of morning light, rocky and rugged, hopefully sight, a whisper of promise, a sense so sweet, reviving energy with every heartbeat. Oh yeah, stumbling down the stairs with grace, favorite smug and cherished embrace. Each sip, a dance of enchantment. Caffeine's elixir, a daily enchantment. Coffee in the morning, my lifeline. Guiding through life's chaotic design. Finding every sip of morning zest. In that brew, I find my best. The morning sun, a gentle caress, bathing the world in warmth no less. A symphony of flavors in every pore, awakening senses, a ritual to adore. The kitchen hums a quiet tune as dreams unfold not too soon. Pouring the elixir, stories take flight. In the world of coffee, my spirit aligns. A mug cradled, a vessel of tales. Each sip, a dialogue as morning unveils. Bitterness, a new world of tales. As the day unfolds, a caffeinated tale in morning symphony, where moments prevail. Coffee, my companion in the sunrise quest, in the ritual of morning, my eternal zest. The world awakens, a canvas so bright, in the palette of dawn, a captivating sight. A dance of flavors, a morning trance. In the world of coffee, life's sweet aroma.